How's it going?
How's it going, man?
Good.
Good.
How are you?
Good.
Here, come on in here a little.
Yeah. Can I ask you for your arguments against your billboard?
My arguments for this?
Yes.
Well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We're talking about children
Yes.
who engage in all sorts of magical thinking. And the
Indeed.
message of gender ideology, wind is my nemesis. The message of gender ideology is that children are born in the wrong body sometimes, which is extraordinarily abusive. Imagine being told that you were born wrong, that you were supposed to be a girl.
But we're not told that. We as humans could discover that we could be in the wrong body just by realizing it.
How can you be in the wrong body?
So we're two parts, the brain and the body, which are one thing but also are two separate things.
So the brain's part of the body.
Exactly, but it's also its own thing. Body can be without a brain but not be a human, and a brain can be in a body but not be a human. It's only a human when both things are in a line with each other.
All right.
And I think that we are in a time that we can express ourselves however we want. And since we're children, we form our ideology based on how we perceive the world and perceive ourselves. And if the world doesn't match with what we believe we are, I think there should be ways so we can align everything that we are in line with ourselves.
So being male or female is not a belief.
It is, I believe.
How so?
So it's
What is it that makes you male?
exactly. That's the whole point. That's
Well, I
the
can
whole
tell
argument.
you what it is.
Can you tell
You
me
produce
your
small
argument?
gametes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
there's the
You
argument.
produce sperm, females produce eggs.
There's the argument that a male can have chromosomes XY and a female can have chromosomes XY.
Yeah, there are
or
chromosomal
XXXY.
abnormalities as well.
Exactly.
And they're all male or female as well.
There's a quote that I've heard that the exception makes the rule. So if we have a rule,
So give me an example of someone who's not male or female.
me.
How so?
So I was born in a male body, but I have never felt the way society perceives males. And I do not want to align with that. I want to align with something that aligns with what I believe I am.
Well, you can believe you're something else, but that doesn't make it reality.
What is reality if
Well-
not what we perceive?
There is such a thing as objective reality. You're a male, you produce sperm, you produce small gametes, and that just is what it is. You don't get to decide what sex you are.
Sex and gender are two separate things.
Yeah, I understand the argument. I've been doing this a long time.
Yes,
Gender, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't exist.
exactly.
It's all about, this whole ideology is about stereotypes,
Exactly.
correct? We're going to agree on a lot here. We're going to agree on a lot here. And we shouldn't be teaching people that just because they don't conform to stereotypes, that means they're not the sex that they are. You can be a gender non-conforming male, and what's wrong with that?
Exactly. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just a perception of things that have to align with what we believe it is. And yeah,
but
children,
sex isn't perception. That's the fundamental lie in this argument.
exactly. So sex is not perception, but sex in its own thing cannot be the whole thing. It has to align with other stereotypes that we assign as society to form a gender that it's either male or female.
No, gender's all nonsense.
Exactly.
If you're a gender non-conforming male, if you don't fit stereotypes, you're still a male. You shouldn't be walking around saying you're non-binary or female.
Why not?
You're still a man. Because you're not a woman and you're not female. That's
So-
why. And
So-
for a variety of reasons. Because if we take that to the next step, so that's the ideology itself. And we agree we shouldn't be stereotyping kids. There's no right or wrong way to be a girl or a boy. The next step, though, is now you have these girls who think they're boys and they believe that they're not going to be happy unless they physically appear as a boy. So they're being given puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. And they're just children. And when you look at the kids who show up at these gender clinics, invariably they have other mental health problems going on. If you look at the Gender Identity Development Service in the UK, which has now stopped doing this to kids. 70% of the children had 5 or more coexisting mental health comorbidities. These kids overwhelmingly are on the autism spectrum. They've suffered abuse, sexual abuse, trauma. They have other personality disorders. In the majority of cases, one of their parents is either deceased or out of the picture. Kids in state care are way overrepresented. Parents have a 10 times greater likelihood of being sex offenders as well. So we're taking all these struggling kids who are now looking to gender ideology as the reason for their struggles. And they're being deceived into believing that the reason for their discomfort is because they're really the opposite gender. And what happens with these drugs, hormones, and surgeries? They get sterilized, they get maimed, they get turned into, oftentimes, especially with the boys, anorgasmic, lifelong pharmaceutical patients. That's not love.
Exactly.
And it all stems from this false ideology that you have a gender that might be separate from your sex. The whole thing's nonsense.
So, as you were saying, we're agreeing a lot of things, and as you're talking, I do agree with pretty much everything that you're saying. The only thing that I disagree is that we don't have to group everything, all those reasonings, as the cause for kids to align with gender ideology. Those are separate problems that have to be addressed separately. Even gender ideology can be, there could be traces of these other problems, but there's also a million different other reasons, and we don't have to. There goes the villain again.
Let me just get this working here. Yeah, thank you. Let's come back into the video screen here. Just come this way just a little. Yeah, so, I mean, we're not going to agree on this ideology bit here today. This idea that our gender was separate from sex is a relatively new idea. This didn't exist before, and you've grown up in this world where they teach this as truth, and I understand why you believe in it, but we really just need to get back to having gender non-conforming people accepting how they are. You can express yourself however you want. It doesn't mean you're the opposite gender, and it certainly doesn't mean that you should be medicalized. So the thing about this is the same people who say we should reject stereotypes, the same people who agree there's no right or wrong way to be a girl or boy, are the ones who say, well, little girl, you need to change your body to look more like a boy. To look more like the stereotypes of the opposite sex.
I do have a lot of people that disagree on that. I do have a lot of friends that disagree on that. Because the people that I've grew up in never tell other people you should be this or you should be that. They discover that by themselves.
Well, I know you say that they're discovering that by themselves, but when you really dig into this, this is a social contagion, and it's not kids discovering it by themselves. It's a contagion affecting mostly girls who have fallen down rabbit holes online, on Tumblr, TikTok, and Reddit, who have been convinced that where they didn't think this before, where this idea never even entered their mind that they were the opposite gender, it's entered their mind because of the internet, or because of teachings at school, or because of peers. So it didn't just come organically on their own.
How do we describe, or how can we define organically? Because if everything's made up, we as humans made the world that we live in. We as humans, and I'm gonna describe humans as the first settlement of humans that grew up in society as tribes, and then made everything. So everything's made up. Stereotypes, religion, society, and then we're just passing teaching from generation to other generations. So we have to first describe or have a consensus of what's organically. The internet, yes, there's a million different companies trying to push their agenda just for profit. But I believe that we should take what's profitable for the company separate from what people actually want to identify as. And as you're saying, we don't have to be long life patients. Yes, And I do agree on that, and I also agree that that should be the case for any other medical things, such as cancer, such as diabetes, such as X, Y, Z.
Yeah, my message is that children are beautiful just as they are.
Yeah, exactly.
No drugs or scalpels needed.
Exactly.
That's what I say all the time.
Exactly.
So I think we might disagree on this ideology a bit and how it came about, but we shouldn't be medicalizing kids.
Exactly.
If someone wants to do something as an adult, that's a totally different conversation, but we need to leave the kids alone, because one thing I didn't even talk about yet, too, and then this is probably my last point, is when you look at the history of gender dysphoria, if you go back decades and you look at all the academic studies that were done before they started drugging these kids, this used to affect boys, mostly. It was a tiny handful of the population, maybe 1 out of 30,000. And when you look at the academic studies, more than 80% of these kids outgrew their gender dysphoria. It went away, it desisted when they went through puberty. So the cure for their gender dysphoria in the vast majority of cases was puberty itself. Now we block the cure. And interestingly, a majority of those kids grew up to be gay.
Interesting.
So these kids today, these effeminate little boys, well, are they going to grow up to be gay? Or are they trans, this somewhat undefinable term? A lot of them would just grow up to be gay, and now their bodies are getting harmed for life. And when you talk to the gay community, it's really split. A lot of them agree with me wholeheartedly. They say if they were growing up today, they would have transitioned, but they're so glad they didn't. And the community, the part of that gay community that's against me, they really haven't put the thought into this. I think they project their own difficulties growing up onto these kids a lot of time, because maybe they were bullied.
Yeah.
And they think the same thing's going on today. But that's not at all what's going on.
Yeah.
We should be leaving these kids alone. The idea that kids need to be turned into pharmaceutical patients,
Yeah.
that's outrageous.
No, yeah, I 1,000,000% agree with you on that. I might not agree with a couple of things, but I do 1,000,000% agree on that. Nobody should be lifelong patient of anything.
Yeah.
Especially by pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, they don't have our children's interests at heart. They have their profits at heart.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I would love to sit down and grab some studies, papers, so I can back up what I'm saying. But I appreciate everything that you're doing, man.
All right, man. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate you.
You too, man. Have
Thank
an
you.
excellent day.
All right, thank you.
Cheers. I hope the wind's not a problem anymore.
I probably need to reposition it or find shelter.
All right, man.
All right,
Cheers.
take care.
Peace.